What is up, everybody? Welcome back into Shout, a Buffalo Bills football podcast. Ravens, Bills this Sunday, 6:30, marquee game of the weekend. And we're going to the Athletic, and Ted Nguyen coming in here, film expert. You can read all of his work over on the Athletic. Kind enough to share some of his insights into this matchup. Ted, how are you?
Good. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. We're doing great out here in Buffalo, even though it's going to be pretty freezing on Sunday. I'm not looking forward to that walk into the stadium, but then I get to be cozy in the press box. So I guess I can't complain too much. I wanted to start with you look at this run defense, and shout out to your appearance on the Ryan Russillo podcast. Go check that out as well. You guys dove into the Bills' run defense or lack thereof, and the matchup that they're facing against the the Baltimore Ravens this week. Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson. I wanted to ask you about specifically what you've seen in this Bills run defense since Matt Milano came back, because there's some numbers that would suggest they've been a little bit better. They did a good job against Denver last week, although that's not really the strength of their offense. They're averaging about 1 yard per rush less since Milano returned. Do you feel like he's the guy that he was at this point last year before the injury, or do you still think he's not quite there?
I don't think he's quite there yet. I mean, I just don't see the splash plays that we're used to seeing from Matt Milano and that burst that we're used to seeing from him quite yet. But I mean, he does make the defense better. But where I'm really concerned with this defense is their how many explosive plays runs they let happen. I think they in the regular season they were seventh worst as far as explosive rushes allowed, and we really saw that against the Ravens. Against the Ravens. The first play was a huge run from Derrick Henry, and Matt Milano only could do so much. I just think they're just very light up front. They depend a lot on penetration and getting some movement at the line of scrimmage, and if they can't do that, then those Ravens offensive linemen are going to be able to get to the second level, and when Derrick Henry gets ahead of steam, it's hard to stop him.
Yeah, and I guess this is kind of a follow-up in team building. I've talked about this on the show multiple times. The Bills have been very apprehensive about adding like a larger one technique, space eating, double team eating defensive tackle for years. Like time they kept going back to the well with Star Lotulelei. When they found Daquan Jones early on, it worked. I mean, he was playing at a super high level before the injury. Do you feel like this is something that they should significantly or seriously consider this offseason? I thought about a guy like maybe Tavondre Sweat for them in the draft this past year and what you've seen from him this year on Tennessee. I know there's probably not that guy in the draft, but getting bigger and bulkier on the inside of their defensive line, how important is that for the Bills moving forward?
I think with the way the league is moving, and you're seeing a lot of the top teams really build physical offensive lines, including the Bills, who really improved the run game and under center run game this year. When you look at the top teams in the league, the Ravens, the Eagles, they are all loading up on the offensive line because they know that defenses are lighter. They know that defenses have focused on stopping the pass for so long. And the Bills were in the forefront of that, playing a ton of nickel defense all the time. But the meta is changing, and I think as the meta changes, you have to be able to adapt as well. So I think for the Bills who have championship aspirations and are going to be in these big games with these teams with these big offensive lines and really good running backs, you have to adjust. And part of adjusting is, like you said, you have to get beefier up front.
So let's put a hypothetical out there. Derrick Henry on the road against the Bills. I think he's averaged in 2 games career in Buffalo less than 100 yards per game. Let's say that happens. What's the path to that for this Bills defense?
I think to me, you're gonna have to get creative up front. Like you're gonna have to move guys up in the front. Like the Eagles are really good at doing this. If you watch them, the Chiefs are really good at doing this, where they show one front and right before the snap, they'll shift into another front, and it just makes the blocking a lot harder. Because I think if you just play them straight up, like we mentioned, there's just not enough beef to hold up against them for 60 minutes or however long they want to run the ball. So I think you have to try to really trick them. You have to use slants, and then I know the Bills aren't a big blitzing team, but I think in this game, run blitzing could help where you're moving guys around, just try to create some sort of penetration or get a free runner in and get some TFLs. Because, for Derrick Henry, if you get him in the backfield, he's a little bit more susceptible to that. But once he gets ahead of steam and he gets into the line of scrimmage, he's extremely hard to stop. So you have to try to get him to change directions before he hits the line of scrimmage as much as you can.
We're chatting with Ted Nguyen from The Athletic. And before we continue, I wanted to shout out Tops Friendly Markets, which right now, if you let them do the cooking, you'll be the real MVP. Visit shop.topsmarkets.com. Elevate your food game with great selection of custom cakes, desserts, pizzas, sandwiches, and more. Score great deals in time for kickoff. Shops.topsmarket.com. All right, so let's flip over to the outside. I was talking a little bit about the interior defensive line. I want to ask you about Von Miller, because if you look at some of the pressure rate statistics, some of the advanced metrics, it appears that Von Miller is trending in the right direction. I mean, if they don't stop the run, it's going to be hard to get Von Miller on the field. He's very much situational at this point in his career. But from a tape perspective, what have you seen from Von Miller as a pass rusher, specifically, I'd say the last 6 to 8 weeks?
I'll be honest, I haven't watched a ton of Von Miller. When I was prepping for this game, I was just really prepared or prepping for the run offense and run defense. So I haven't watched a ton of Von Miller to give you a great answer on that.
How important do you think he is, though, against Lamar? Because if you think about some of their athletic edge setting, defenders, you think about Greg Rousseau, AJ Epinesa. Greg Rousseau specifically does such a great job in these matchups against mobile quarterbacks. I thought the Eagles that you referenced, their two, specifically Josh Sweat, I think Nolan Smith was also involved, did a really good job of keeping him in the pocket, but then also when the Eagles hit him, they hit him and they brought him down. I think that's one of the keys to this game as well. And I feel like Von Miller's got to be a big part of that.
Yeah, for sure. I think Von Miller is extremely experienced. So with Lamar Jackson and even Josh Allen, you can't just straight up rush them. You have to be disciplined. You have to know, all right, you have to kind of balance out, all right, I could go 100% on this play, or I could try to really speed rush on this play, but on the next play I have to be careful and maybe just power rush, or at least keep my outside hand free and not run past them, because you open up those lanes. When Von Miller at his best too, they did in Denver, they did a lot of make me right stunts where the edge rusher would have the free reign, and then the defensive tackle would play off of that. So if he went outside, the defensive tackle stays inside. If he went inside, the defensive tackle would loop around outside. And obviously the Bills have some athletic ability inside to be able to do those type of things. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some of that.
For the last thing I want to hit on the Ravens offense is the uncertainty around Zay Flowers. If he is unable to go in this game, he played in week 1. I think he only had 1 catch in that game, or in week 4 against the Bills. They didn't really need it. I mean, Derrick Henry had his game. If he's unavailable, how does that change things for the Baltimore offense?
It changes it big time, because he's the guy who really opens up a lot of space for this offense. He's the one guy that can really take the top off of defenses. They love throwing screens because of his yak ability. And he it seems like he always gets open on these big crossers that they like to run because of his horizontal speed. So when you take that element out of the offense, it just makes everything a little bit tighter. And against the Steelers, it didn't really hurt them because they were able to run the ball so effectively. But when you get into a high scoring game, and theoretically this game should be high scoring, and Josh Allen should be able to keep answering if it gets into that. That's when it's going to hurt you. I mean, you need that speed, you need that big game ability. So I think it really is going to affect the Ravens offense. I mean, they really don't have another receiver like him. They don't have another speedy guy like him. I mean, Nelson Aguilar might be the closest guy, but I mean, I wouldn't trust him to catch the ball a lot, especially in a cold game.
Interesting. You mentioned Josh Allen potentially having a big game in this one. And I was wondering, one of the things, as I've seen them set up this jumbo package throughout the season, I mean, Joe Brady leaned into it heavily. Ken Dorsey did it a little bit as well. It's not like new necessarily, But as it's evolved over the course of the season, they primarily run out of it. There's at times they do some stuff in the passing game. Like I think one of Amari Cooper's big highlight touchdowns was out of jumbo package a few weeks ago. But I'm wondering if you've noticed over the last couple of weeks, they've really started to reintroduce Reggie Gilliam as an offensive weapon. For a while there, they weren't really using the fullback in their offense, primarily in their offense. And all of a sudden they're starting to kind of spam it a little bit more. Do you feel like that kind of shift to this huge, big, heavy personnel could potentially, against a team like Baltimore, where it could be tough to run against them, you can maybe expose them a little bit on the boundary with guys like Amari and Keon Cooper out of that package?
Yeah, I would think coming into this game, it wouldn't be a huge part of the game plan because of how good the Ravens are at stopping the run. But I definitely think it should be used sporadically and using the pass to kind of set it up so maybe you could run a little bit later on in the game would be important. So Brandon Stevens is a corner for the Ravens that I think gets picked on, and he's the weakest part of the defense. And we saw that against the Steelers. He got picked on by George Pickens, and he got hit deep a couple times. So if you're able to get single coverage, and you can do that if you get into your jumbo package and maybe run some play action and get the free safety to get held for 1 second, you can beat him deep. So I think one of the strategies has to be do what it takes to get a one-on-one for Amari Cooper. I think even though he hasn't really been a huge part of the offense lately, to me he has the speed to expose Brandon Stevens, and he's done this in his career where he's kind of disappeared for stretches, and all of a sudden he'll come out and have like a 150-yard game. Not that he'll have that big of a game against the Ravens, but I think they definitely have to game plan some shots to him and get him matched up with Brandon Stevens, and doing that out of their jumbo package would be a great way to do it.
There was so much made going into the Broncos game about Patrick Surtain locking down a side of the field, this Broncos defense that was really vaunted throughout the season. People talked about them probably giving them a chance to win on the road with a rookie quarterback because of that defense. What did you see that the Bills were able to kind of eventually break through against that unit?
Yeah, I think the Broncos have a very light front, so the Bills just straight up played bully ball against them. They didn't really involve Josh Allen in the run game as much. It was just like straight handoffs to James Cook, and I think the weakness in that defense was their nickel corner. They did a good job of creating or getting targets to Khalil Shakir. They did a good job getting targets to their tight ends, which is kind of their answer against man coverage. Like against Detroit, they like to really expose those inside matchups with their tight ends and running backs, especially Johnson, who I think is a really underrated third down back. So they did a good job exposing the weaknesses of that Broncos defense by getting them in the run game and just creating matchups for their inside guys.
One guy that I think everybody expected to, really in a splashy way break onto the scene this year after they moved on from Stephon Diggs was Dalton Kincaid. And because of this, like everybody eats mantra that Joe Brady has enacted. And I mean, in a lot of ways, I think their offense has been successful because of it. But Kincaid hasn't really broken out. And he's still kind of looking for maybe his signature Bills performance. How do you feel like he is potentially set up to have a game against this Ravens defense? And what have been your impressions of Kincaid in year two here?
Yeah, I mean, I had a very high opinion of Kincaid in the draft, as many analysts did. So it's been kind of disappointed to see him just not be able to be very productive in his offense. I mean, part of it's, Doxson Knox is he's a good tight end and he gets his targets too. But I think one surprising part is he just hasn't been able to win consistently in the intermediate, and like you're not going to send your tight end deep all the time. But yeah, I wanted to see him just get downfield more. It seems like a lot of his targets are off of choice routes and underneath routes. So I would like to see him get some more targets downfield a little bit more. The Ravens play a ton of zone coverage. So if you could suck those underneath defenders up, there's going to be lanes in the intermediate parts of the field or in the seams. If a tight end really starts to threaten the Ravens, then they're going to move Kyle Hamilton off the middle of the field and then have him match up with those tight ends, or at least play the zone area near those tight ends. So if Kincaid could have some success and affect the defense that way, that could open up things for the Bills receivers.
So if I tell you at the end of this game, Derrick Henry had a good game, like 80, 90 yards, and somebody else really exploded for Baltimore's offense with Zay Flowers potentially out, who are you looking at to potentially have a good game against this defense?
I would say Isaiah Likely. He's kind of, he's kind of their auxiliary guy. Like, they're not going to create game plans for him every single week, but they definitely went to him last game against the Pittsburgh Steelers without Zay Flowers. But he's just a natural separator. He can create after the catch. Obviously, a lot of attention is going to go to Mark Andrews in a passing game. So when you get into those 12 personnel looks, obviously teams are going to be afraid of those Derrick Henry runs. So they have to put bigger guys on the field, and that's when Isaiah Likely could really take advantage of some matchups. He's a hard guy to match up with as far as finding a body type to match up with him.
Yeah, he's a real problem. I mean, he's such a fluid pass catcher. You don't expect that out of his size and the position in general. So I think that's a great choice. Last question I have for you. You look at Josh Allen in this offense. You mentioned that he didn't have to run very much against Denver last week. You kind of think he might have to be a runner this week. Why do you think that's the case? And what do you think the upside is for a James Cook in this game?
Yeah, to me, I think the running game is going to have to be a lot more Josh Allen centric. Like, you can't just line up under center and go jumbo package and run James Cook on duo or those type of runs all game against this type of front. I think you want to spread them out, get into shotgun, and then get into play some option football. Do what the Ravens do. Obviously, the Bills do their own brand of it with their tackle pools and that sort of thing. So this is to me should be a big Josh Allen running game. Yeah, I mean, I think for James Cook, he runs very well out of the shotgun. So he's going to be a big part of the plan as well. But to me, I mean, Josh Allen should have 15, 17 option runs. It doesn't mean he's going to keep all of those runs, but he should be a threat, and you have to be able to balance out the numbers, and you can do that with the option game against this Ravens defense.
Ted Nguyen from The Athletic, thank you so much for joining us, my man. Take a second here. Let everybody know where they can find your work, anything you got going on this week and beyond.
Yeah, you can read me at The Athletic. I have a YouTube channel, Ted Nguyen NFL, where I do play breakdowns and game plan breakdowns, so you could check that out as well.
Awesome stuff. Thank you so much.